In the far reaches of the galaxy, the art of combat was not merely a matter of war. It was an institution, a form of prestige, a way of life, and an arena where the strongest, the most skilled, and the most revered came together to test their mettle. This was not just battle, but the sacred tradition of duels. Across the stars, countless species vied for dominance not through armies, but through the ancient and highly respected practice of one-on-one combat. Duelists were revered figures, capable of single-handedly altering the balance of power within their societies. They were not simply warriors, they were champions, warriors trained in ancient techniques, honed by generations of combat. These duels were not fought with weapons of mass destruction or technology, but with the blade, the shield, the spear, and the fist combat that was as much art as it was science. For eons, the universe had watched in awe as the Greyloth, an alien species known for their lethal martial abilities and strict code of honor, dominated the dueling circuit. Their duel masters were legends, fighting in arenas where only the most elite combatants dared to step foot. No species had ever dared to challenge their supremacy, until one day, a human swordsman from Earth arrived in the great arena. The galaxy had never seen a duel like this. A human and outsider daring to challenge the most skilled beings in the universe. This was the moment that would forever change the way the galaxy viewed the Terrans. But how could they know? How could anyone know that a species, known for its ingenuity and adaptability rather than its martial prowess, could produce a swordsman who would outclass the greatest duel master the galaxy had ever known? Alexander Grant, a man from Earth, was not born into a family of warriors. He was a historian, a scholar, a student of the ancient martial traditions of Earth. Yet, he was also an anomaly, a man who had long studied and trained in the lost arts of swordsmanship, learning the ways of blades that had long been forgotten on his homeworld. Alexander's obsession with dueling and ancient combat techniques had led him to train in every sword style Earth had ever produced: samurai katana, European longswords, African sabers, and even the short blades of the South American empires. He had immersed himself in centuries-old texts and spent years honing his body to perfection, practicing daily in solitude, until he had mastered the sword in a way that few could comprehend. When humanity made its first contact with the galaxy's various species, Alexander's name had been thrust into the spotlight. He had become a symbol of humanity's drive for greatness. While other humans focused on technology and diplomacy, Alexander pursued a different goal: to prove that humans could dominate any field of endeavor, including the ancient art of combat. When word reached the Terran Confederation that the Greyloth duel masters were hosting a public tournament in their capital city of Growlnath, Earth had sent its representative, a humble yet determined human swordsman. It was a highly controversial decision. Many of the galaxy's leaders and militaries scoffed at the idea of a human entering such a prestigious event. What did humans know of such an ancient tradition of combat? The truth, however, was that they knew more than anyone realized. The Greyloth were a formidable species, tall, with muscular frames and skin that shimmered like polished obsidian. Their eyes were slitted, a reflection of their ancient heritage, and their culture revolved entirely around the art of combat. Every Greyloth was trained from birth to become a skilled warrior, and the title of duel master was a highly coveted position within their society. To be named a duel master meant that a Greyloth had defeated all others in a series of brutal contests, proving that they were the absolute apex of martial skill. The duel masters were treated with the highest respect, and they carried the honor of their entire species. The current reigning duel master of the Greyloth was the Los Vok, a legend in his own right. The Los had won his title after slaying dozens of the galaxy's fiercest duelists, including the strongest of his own people. His reputation was unmatched. His skill with the Grawl blade, an ancient and uniquely crafted weapon, was said to be unassailable. There were no known weaknesses in his style. No one had ever come close to defeating him, and many believed that no one ever could. When Alexander Grant had been accepted into the tournament, the Greyloth's elders had whispered amongst themselves, unsure whether to even let the human participate. The idea of a Terran standing on the same platform as a duel master like the Los Vok seemed laughable. A human, after all, could not possibly understand the subtleties and complexities of Greyloth combat. How could a race that had only been part of the galactic community for a mere fraction of time hope to compete with beings who had perfected their art over millennia? But what the Greylith did not know was that humans had an edge they had never considered: the human spirit. The arena was a colossal structure, built into the side of a mountain on Gralnatha's largest continent. Thousands of spectators filled the seats, the air buzzing with excitement. Species from all across the galaxy had come to witness the spectacle. Massive holographic screens displayed the battles as they unfolded. The humans, the Ithaki, the Velcrim, and even the Gorath had sent representatives, each eager to see what would unfold in this highly anticipated contest. The first rounds of the tournament were predictable: Greylith duelists easily dispatching their opponents. There were no surprises, and the crowd cheered loudly as their champions obliterated the lesser fighters, sending them flying out of the arena or leaving them disarmed and humiliated. The reputation of the Greylith as the strongest dueling species was cemented with every victory. Then came Alexander Grant's turn. Alexander stepped into the arena with nothing but a standard-issue Terran longsword, its gleaming steel reflecting the light from the floating crystal orbs that hovered above. He wore no extravagant armor, no enhancements. Just his simple combat attire and the calm expression on his face. As he stood there, his eyes locked on the Greylith opponent before him, a towering warrior with the elegant and deadly Graal blade. The Greylith duel master was ready for the match. The two combatants faced off, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. The air seemed to tremble as the Greylith raised his blade high, a weapon forged from the finest metals of their homeworld, a blade that had been passed down through generations of warriors. It was said that the Graal blade could cut through anything, that no shield or armor could withstand its edge. The match began. The Los moved with speed and precision, his blade a blur of motion as it cut through the air. He was a master of timing, an expert in the art of strike and defense. His every move was designed to overwhelm, to crush the spirit of the opponent before the first blow even landed. But Alexander Grant was different. He wasn't there to overwhelm. He wasn't there to rely on raw power or speed. He was there to outthink, to outmaneuver, to be as fluid and unpredictable as the blade he wielded. Alexander's approach was the ancient style of fencing, one built on timing, precision, and control. The two swords clashed. At first, the Greylith duel master's strikes were ferocious, each blow aimed with deadly intent. But Alexander didn't retreat. He didn't falter. His sword met the Graal blade with a controlled, practiced defense, redirecting the blows with calculated parries. The crowd gasped at the sight of the human fighting with such poise and skill. It was impossible. The Greylith had never seen anything like it. The turning point, realization. Then came the moment when everything changed. As the Losvok unleashed a powerful downward strike, aiming to cleave Alexander in two, the human warrior's blade twisted in a way that no one expected. Instead of blocking the blow, he let it slide off his sword, using the momentum to spin behind the Los. In one smooth, fluid motion, Alexander's blade came down with a precise, clean strike not aimed at Thalos' body, but at his weapon. The Graal blade, said to be unbreakable, snapped in half. The arena fell silent. The Losvok, stunned and disarmed, staggered back, realizing that he was no longer holding the weapon that had made him a legend. His arrogance faltered, replaced by disbelief. The duel master of the Greylith had been outclassed by a human, a being so alien to their way of life that he should not have even been capable of standing in the arena. But Alexander was not done. With a swift, graceful movement, he raised his sword, the edge gleaming in the light. The Losvok, stripped of his weapon and honor, knelt before the human, a swordsman who had just become the most dangerous combatant in the galaxy. From that day on, the galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. Alexander Grant's victory over the Greylith duel master became a defining moment, a symbol of humanity's unparalleled adaptability, resilience, and innate potential. In that moment, Alexander showed the universe that humans could excel at anything they set their minds to, no matter the odds, no matter the challenge. And the galaxy learned a valuable lesson: never underestimate the human spirit. The ripple effect, a new era begins. The arena, once filled with the thunderous cheers of spectators, was now quiet, reverberating with a silence that felt like it could last an eternity. The broken remains of the Grawl blade lay scattered on the ground before Alexander Grant, and the arena's vast holographic screens, which had broadcasted the match to billions, now displayed his image, a human swordsman, standing victorious in an alien world against the most skilled and dangerous combatant the galaxy had ever seen. For a moment, no one moved. The Greylith, their proud warriors, stood frozen in disbelief. To the leaders and representatives of the galaxy who had watched, some in awe, others in shock, the magnitude of what had just transpired began to settle in. A human had defeated the greatest duel master in the galaxy. As the minutes passed, the weight of the event began to settle. The Los Vok, the once untouchable legend, now knelt before the human in his humble stance. His once imposing figure was reduced to nothing. The Greylith's honor was in tatters. The duels, which had been their cultural cornerstone for millennia, had now been challenged by someone from a species that had only recently joined the intergalactic community. The Los rose slowly, his eyes filled with a mixture of respect, disbelief, and even reluctant admiration. His voice, normally booming and commanding, was now quiet and humble. "You have bested me, human," he said, his voice thick with pride and a strange respect. "And in doing so, you have defeated all the assumptions that our galaxy has held for so long. I yield." "You have my respect," Alexander replied, his voice steady, but tinged with the same quiet strength that had carried him through the duel. He wasn't here to humiliate the Greylith, he was here to prove a point about humanity's capability. "And I offer you the same." The crowd, which had been holding its breath, erupted into applause, though the sound was a far cry from the usual celebrations. This was not just a victory for Alexander Grant, it was a victory for Earth. The human species had just proven, in the most public and undeniable way possible, that their ingenuity, adaptability, and determination made them a force to be reckoned with on the galactic stage. In the days following the duel, the galaxy was abuzz with conversations, debates, and analyses of what had transpired. News spread like wildfire through the interstellar communications networks, sparking discussions from one end of the galaxy to the other. For the first time, humanity's name was not just synonymous with its reputation for cleverness, technological innovation, and adaptability, it now carried the weight of combat mastery as well. The Terran Confederation quickly realized that this event was not just a fluke, it was a revolution in how they were perceived by the galaxy. Humans had always been known for their scientific achievements and their ability to turn the tide of a battle with technology, but this victory proved something far more significant. Humans could dominate in a realm where raw skill and tradition mattered most. From that point on, every species, from the majestic Velcrum to the deadly Gorith, had to reckon with the fact that humans with nothing but their minds and bodies had bested a being who had been thought to be invincible. This wasn't just the story of a duel, this was the dawn of a new era for Earth. The reaction to Alexander's victory was not universally positive. The Greylith, while showing respect, were deeply shaken. Their warriors, once unquestioned masters of combat, now faced the truth that their place in the galaxy was no longer secure. The Los Vok's defeat was more than just a blow to his honor, it was a blow to the Greylith identity itself. The Greylith Council, the ruling body of their species, called an emergency meeting. For the first time in millennia, the Greylith were forced to reassess their place in the galaxy. Their centuries of supremacy had been shattered in a single moment by a human they had never even considered a threat. In the months that followed, the Greylith would engage in several internal discussions, seeking a way to respond, not only to regain their honor, but to ensure that humanity would not overshadow them in the galaxy's complex tapestry of power dynamics. The Velcrum, a race of ancient, highly intelligent beings who had been observing humanity from the shadows, were also deeply intrigued. The Velcrum had long seen themselves as the most advanced species in the galaxy. Their intelligence and long-lived wisdom were unrivaled. But the battle prowess displayed by Alexander Grant intrigued them. For the first time in eons, they began to reconsider their previous assumptions about humanity. The human ability to adapt quickly, not only in terms of technology but in terms of combat and tactics, struck them as a highly dangerous and unpredictable quality. Meanwhile, the Ithaki, a race of psychic and telepathic beings, remained neutral in their assessments. However, they noted the humans' mental discipline, something that seemed to surpass that of many of the other species they had encountered. This was something the Ithaki did not underestimate, a warrior capable of using not just their body, but their mind, to outsmart and overpower an opponent. It was rare, even among the Ithaki themselves. But it was the Gorath who made the first bold move. Long a mysterious and aggressive species, the Gorath had always admired strength and brutality. They took an immediate interest in Alexander's victory, seeing it as an opportunity to exploit humanity's newfound prominence. Not long after the duel, a Gorath warlord named Korgoth the Relentless sent a message to the Terran Confederation. The message was simple, direct, and filled with pride. Human, we challenge you. Prove that your strength is not limited to a single duel master. Come to the arena and face our champions. Only then will we acknowledge your species as a worthy adversary. It was an open challenge, a declaration of war, not in terms of guns and ships, but of combat. The Gorath were known throughout the galaxy for their unyielding brutality in battle. Their warriors were renowned for their massive size, their raw physical strength, and their combat style, which valued ferocity above all else. The challenge was a test of humanity's strength. Was Alexander's victory just a fluke, or had the Terran species truly unlocked a power within themselves that no one had expected? The challenge from the Gorath was met with a wave of mixed emotions across the Terran Confederation. While some saw it as an opportunity to prove that humanity could stand tall in the face of greater threats, others feared it would drag them into an intergalactic conflict they weren't ready for. However, it was Alexander Grant who stepped forward once more. He knew that humanity's place in the galaxy had been marked by the duel, but the challenge from the Gorath would be the real test. Could humanity's greatest swordsman, and by extension, the entire Terran species, stand against the brutal power of the Gorath? Alexander didn't hesitate. He accepted the Gorath challenge, not just for himself, but for Earth. His message to the Gorath was brief, yet it carried the weight of his previous victory. We will meet your champions in the arena. We will prove that humanity is not a species to be underestimated. The message was sent. The stage was set. As the day of the Gorath challenge neared, Earth stood united, its people watching with bated breath. Alexander had already changed the course of history once. Now, he would face a new kind of opponent, one that sought to test not just his skill, but the spirit of humanity itself. The day arrived. The galaxy had been watching the escalating events with intense interest, and when the invitation from the Gorath was finally accepted, the anticipation became unbearable. The Gorath Arena, located on their homeworld, was the largest and most brutal in existence. It was built into a massive crater at the base of a dormant volcano, its towering stone walls an imposing symbol of the Gorath's love for physical strength and combat. Unlike the Greylith Arena, which had been a grand stage of honor and tradition, the Gorath Arena was primal and savage. It was a place where only the strongest could survive, and those who entered it without the strength to back their claims were destined for ruin. The arena was broadcast across the galaxy, each species tuning in, some curious, some wary, and others perhaps eager to see humanity fall. The very nature of the challenge itself was a statement. The Gorath did not fight to win, they fought to break their opponents, both physically and mentally. Their champions were known for overwhelming force, sheer brutality, and their no-mercy combat philosophy. The Terran Confederation, though initially concerned, now stood firmly behind Alexander. His victory over the Greylith had sent ripples through every species' understanding of combat. Humanity was no longer the underdog. Alexander's response to the challenge had been resolute. He had become a symbol not just for Earth, but for every human who had ever dared to dream beyond their limitations. Humanity's eyes were upon him. As Alexander entered the arena, the temperature of the volcanic surroundings made the air feel like molten lava. The distant echoes of Gorath battle drums reverberated through the rocky terrain, building a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. The audience, comprised of various species from all across the galaxy, watched with bated breath. The Gorath were a terrifying sight. Towering, broad-shouldered, and ferocious, they wore little in terms of armor, preferring instead to rely on their enormous strength and endurance. Their faces, sharp and angular, carried an unsettling predatory quality. Their eyes gleamed with the hunger of creatures accustomed to crushing their foes beneath their heels. But Alexander? He was a lone figure, a small human by comparison, standing in the center of the arena with his Terran longsword in hand, his expression calm and focused. His sword, though less ornate than the Grawl blade he had faced earlier, was a symbol of human ingenuity, a perfectly balanced weapon designed for agility, precision, and versatility. The gleam of the steel under the harsh light of the volcanic arena spoke volumes. This was a weapon born of both mind and muscle. A tool shaped by a species that had honed its understanding of combat in ways the Gorath could never anticipate. The Gorath challenger was none other than Korgith the Relentless, the most feared warlord among the Gorath. Korgith had never been defeated in combat. His size, strength, and ferocity were legendary. No one had come close to matching him. Korgith entered the arena with a roar, his massive form clad in simple but thick battle armor. His weapon of choice was a massive war axe, forged from the bones of the deadliest beasts of Gorath. The weapon itself was almost as large as Alexander's body, designed to cleave through anything in its path with a single blow. The ground trembled as Korgith swung his war axe, testing its weight and readiness for battle. His eyes locked on Alexander, filled with an eagerness for the destruction to come. Alexander, by contrast, did not rush. He was focused, his breathing slow and controlled. He was here to prove something not just to Korgith, but to the universe. Humanity was not weak. The battle, strength versus technique. The gong sounded. Without hesitation, Korgith charged. The sheer power of the Gorath warlord's approach sent shockwaves through the arena. He swung his massive war axe with earth-shattering force, aiming to cleave Alexander in two with a single stroke. The ground beneath Korgith cracked as his strength propelled him forward, but Alexander did not panic. He did not retreat. With a calculated sidestep, Alexander danced to the side, narrowly avoiding the arc of the war axe as it slashed through the air. He could feel the force of the swing as it passed. If he had been even a fraction of a second slower, it would have been his end. Instead of responding with brute force, Alexander used the momentum of Korgith's swing to his advantage. With a swift movement, Alexander's sword shot out, targeting Korgith's exposed side, where his armor was weakest. But Korgith was faster than expected. With a quick movement, he shifted his stance, and his spiked gauntlet deflected Alexander's blade, sending the human back a step. The warlord's roar echoed across the arena as he turned, preparing for his next devastating strike. Alexander's eyes narrowed. This wasn't just a battle of strength, it was a battle of wits. Korgith was clearly powerful, but his size and brute force were also his weaknesses. His movements were heavy and predictable, relying on overwhelming his opponents with raw aggression. Alexander understood that in order to defeat him, he would need to exploit the gaps in Korgith's defense, to wear him down, and above all, never let his own guard drop. The next several minutes became a dance of death. Korgith's relentless strikes were countered by Alexander's precision. Every time the Gorath warlord attempted a crushing blow, Alexander would sidestep, redirect, or deflect. He would jab at Korgith's joints, finding the weaknesses in the gaps between armor plates. Korgith roared in frustration as his axe swiped through the air again and again, each time missing Alexander by inches. His massive hands were starting to tremble with exhaustion, his heavy armor weighing down on him. Despite the overwhelming strength behind every swing, Korgith's stamina was running out. Meanwhile, Alexander's control was perfect. His movements were precise, controlled, and patient. He was grinding down the Gorath's strength, carefully forcing Korgith to make mistakes. With one final, forceful lunge, Alexander twisted and aimed for Korgith's exposed neck. The blow was sharp and quick, a calculated strike that pierced through the gaps in the Goratha's armor. Korgotha's breath caught in his throat as the tip of Alexander's sword scraped against his skin. The arena fell silent. Korgoth stood frozen for a long moment, his massive form trembling, before he slowly lowered his war axe to the ground. With a grunt, the Gorath warlord fell to his knees. His strength had been utterly exhausted, his massive size no match for the tactical brilliance and endurance of the human warrior before him. Alexander didn't take a step forward. He stood, silent and poised, his sword held steady at his side. The battle was over. As Korgoth collapsed fully to the ground, the audience, once skeptical of humanity's place among the stars, erupted in applause. It wasn't just the sound of victory, it was the sound of respect. Respect for a species that had been underestimated for so long. A species that had defied expectations and proven itself unstoppable in ways no one could have predicted. The message had been clear. Humanity was here to stay. Korgoth, battered and defeated, lifted his head and gazed at Alexander. This time, there was no arrogance in his eyes, only genuine respect. He slowly raised his hand in submission, a symbol of the warrior's code. "You have bested me, human. You have bested the Gorath." Alexander stepped forward, offering his hand to the fallen warlord, a gesture that spoke of both humility and honor. "We are all warriors in this galaxy," Alexander replied. "Strength is not only measured by size or power, but by the will to stand up when all seems lost." As Korgoth accepted the gesture, the weight of the moment became clear. This wasn't just a victory for Alexander, it was a victory for all of humanity. And from this moment on, the galaxy would remember the name of Earth. Alexander's victory in the arena against Korgoth was not simply a personal triumph, it had ignited a fire across the entire galaxy. The Terran Confederation, which had already begun to establish itself as a technological and scientific power, now found itself thrust into the spotlight as a military force, an unexpected and yet undeniable presence among the stars. The news networks across the galaxy buzzed with reports of the event, and the words human and victory were now inseparable in the minds of every species that had watched the duel. What had begun as a calculated gamble, humanity's challenge to a terrifying apex predator, had transformed into something far larger. The galaxy had witnessed firsthand the raw, unyielding strength of human ingenuity, determination, and, most importantly, spirit. The Terran Confederation, once viewed as an emerging power, now found itself at the precipice of intergalactic diplomacy, with an ever-growing influence in galactic affairs. No longer would humanity be pushed aside or underestimated. The question now was whether humanity would use its newfound power to unite the galaxy or to dominate it. The Council of the Galactic Powers. The defeat of Korgoth sent shockwaves through the ruling councils of the galaxy's most powerful factions. Each species began to reassess their strategies, their alliances, and their ambitions. The Greylith, having already lost face after their own defeat at the hands of Alexander, were deeply troubled by the rise of humanity. Though the Losvok had shown respect in the aftermath of his duel with Alexander, his people were not so willing to forget. Their ancient pride had been shattered twice in a matter of months, once by the human swordsman's skills, and now by the might of the Gorath warlord falling before the same species. The Greylith Council convened in urgency to determine their next course of action. In the Velcrum Enclave, a species known for its brilliant intellect and ancient wisdom, there were whispers of a new form of evolution. The Velcrum High Council had been watching humanity from the shadows for years, intrigued by their potential. But now, after Alexander's victory, the Velcrum began to realize that humanity was not simply an emerging species to be studied, it was one to be reckoned with. In the Ithaki Collective, the telepathic and psychic beings whose abilities were revered across the stars, the defeat of Korgoth was a perplexing event. The Ithaki had always placed emphasis on mental discipline and psychic prowess, and their society had long held the belief that mind over matter was the ultimate form of superiority. Alexander's victory through physical means, bypassing psychic interference with sheer willpower, disturbed their deeply held beliefs. The Kralin Dominion, a militaristic empire known for their advanced war machines and devastating weaponry, looked upon humanity with a mixture of disdain and curiosity. If humans were capable of defeating such overwhelming physical strength with mere skill and tactics, then they were more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Some within the Kralin military began to openly question their existing strategies. If humanity could wield such power on the battlefield, how could the Dominion maintain their military supremacy? But the most urgent responses came from the Galactic Senate, a loose confederation of the galaxy's most powerful species. The Senate had always operated on the principle of a delicate balance of power. They had feared humanity's rise for years, but now they saw the writing on the wall. Humanity was no longer the weak, fragile species they had once dismissed. With Alexander's victories fresh in their minds, the Senate began to consider how to engage with this rising power. As humanity began to assert itself on the galactic stage, the Terran Confederation realized that it was walking a fine line. The victory of Alexander Grant was only the first step. Now, they faced the challenge of how to engage with the other powers of the galaxy. Would they continue to rise as a dominant force, or would they seek peaceful coexistence with the other species? President Ellen Avery, the leader of the Terran Confederation, convened a summit of the highest-ranking officials, military leaders, and diplomats from across Earth's colonies. The discussions were fraught with tension. The galaxy was no longer a safe place for underestimation. Every faction would now be watching humanity closely, ready to either challenge them or ally with them. "It's clear we've made an impact," President Avery said as she stood at the head of the room, overlooking the large holographic display of the galaxy. Alexander's victory wasn't just a win for humanity, it was a signal to the entire galaxy. But we need to be careful. The other factions are watching us. We cannot afford to make rash moves. This could lead to war or the collapse of diplomacy. But General Marcus Hayes, the commander of Earth's fleet, was far more direct. "Diplomacy is one thing, Madam President, but we can't rely on it alone. We've proven that humanity can hold its own, and if they think for 1 second we're going to let our guard down, they're mistaken. The other species will test us, they'll see if we're truly worthy of our place." The debate was heated. While some favored pushing humanity's newfound strength to the forefront, others feared the repercussions of antagonizing too many factions at once. Humanity needed alliances, but it also needed to project strength. "We should send a message," Admiral Claire Thornton said, her voice calm but firm. "A diplomatic delegation, yes. But we should also make it clear that our power is not something to be trifled with." After weeks of internal debate, a decision was made. The Terran Confederation would host a summit, inviting the leading species from the galaxy to Earth, where they would engage in discussions about humanity's role in galactic affairs. The summit was to be held at New Horizon, an expansive space station orbiting Earth. Representatives from the Greylith, Velcrim, Ithaki, Goreth, and Kralin empires would attend, each with their own agenda. For Earth, this would be their first major diplomatic meeting with the galactic powers. The event was to be symbolic, a chance to showcase not only humanity's military might but their commitment to peace and cooperation in the galaxy. Yet beneath the surface, the tensions were palpable. Every leader knew that beneath the formalities, this summit would be the moment of truth. Would humanity integrate itself into the galactic order, or would they assert their dominance over it? Alexander Grant, the man whose victories had altered the course of history, was asked to speak on behalf of the Terran Confederation. His words would carry weight, perhaps more than any diplomat's. As the day of the summit arrived, Alexander Grant found himself in a position he never could have imagined when he first stepped onto that alien arena. He was no longer just a soldier. He was the embodiment of humanity's potential. Standing before the delegates from across the galaxy, Alexander took a deep breath. The eyes of the galaxy were upon him. The powerful figures from every faction waited for him to speak. He knew the stakes were high. What he said in this moment could set the tone for centuries to come. He began simply, his voice steady, but carrying the weight of his experience. "We stand at the edge of something greater. The battle we fought in the arena was not just about strength or tactics, it was about possibility. The possibility that every species has the right to evolve, to challenge, and to redefine what it means to be strong. He paused, letting his words sink in. Humanity has shown that we will not be underestimated. But we also believe that every species in this galaxy has something valuable to offer. We are not here to dominate, we are here to engage. To learn. To share what we know and to grow together. His words resonated through the chamber. The delegates were silent, each processing what had been said. But, Alexander continued, his voice sharpening with determination, we will not stand idly by if our existence is threatened. We will fight to protect our home, our people, and our way of life, just as we have done before. Our strength lies not just in our power but in our resolve. As he finished, the chamber remained silent for a long moment. The representatives exchanged glances, and for the first time in galactic history, humanity had a voice.